Look, I know how crazy this is going to sound, but I don't care. What I have to say has to be said. It's bigger than a couple of aliens. It has to do with the entire planet, the universe, who knows what all. Our story begins on an unseasonably chilly Friday night in the spring of 1996. I was a 14-year-old sci-fi geek living in the middle of nowhere. Tired from an especially hectic week of high school, I was eager for a little peace and quiet. I just wanted to go home, relax, play a board game with my kid's sister, watch some television. And then it happened. The thing that forever changed my life. I had an experience. I witnessed something I could not explain. That wasn't a UFO encounter. It was a television episode. But it broke all the rules. It made me laugh, and it made me cry, and it made me think. It was the most amazing episode of television I'd ever seen. I was amazed at how my sense of consciousness could be so transformed by nothing more magical than watching Jose Chung's From Outer Space. I've spent the past 20 years obsessed with that single episode of The X-Files. I've read everything I could on Jose Chung, not because I had to, but because I wanted to. I initially wrote a short paper, and then later composed a thesis, and ultimately recorded the lecture you're about to watch. Because you see, I wasn't alone that cold, lonely night in April 1996. 16 million people saw something in the airwaves that night. Now, not everybody was a believer. Some dismissed Jose Chung as cinematic swamp gas. But I knew what I'd seen. A loud and persistent voice in my head kept telling me, this means something. This is important. And the next week, after the X-Files had returned to its regularly scheduled programming of monsters and conspiracies, the voice in my head told me not to be afraid. It told me that Jose Chung was a glimpse into the shape of things to come. It told me that one day, art like Jose Chung would return. And did I believe the voice? I wanted to believe. Jose Chung aired on April 12th, 1996. It was written by Darin Morgan. X-Files has been called the ultimate postmodern television show. Jose Chung's From Outer Space could be called one of the first examples of postmodernism, or metamodernism. The X-Files is a show about aliens and conspiracies. Jose Chung's From Outer Space isn't like the X-Files. It's not actually about aliens or conspiracy. Jose Chung's From Outer Space is about the X-Files itself.
It's bigger than a couple of kids. It has to do with the entire planet, the universe, and who knows what all.
So imagine once upon a time, you go and watch an episode of I Love Lucy. You don't need to know who Lucy is. All you need to do is show up and turn on the television, and I Love Lucy will entertain you. Whereas modernist TV attempted to be encapsulated and universally accessible, postmodern TV started to introduce limited intertextuality. Dog whistles or Easter eggs, things that improved your enjoyment if you got them, but if you didn't catch the reference, it was okay. You could go right on. Metamodernism is different. Metamodernism elevates intertextuality to a critical, central role. With metamodernism, intertextuality becomes its own character. Jose Chung is a great example of this. The very first shot we see is from one of the most famous shots in history. We see a Star Destroyer chasing a blockade runner. Jose Chung uses the maintenance vehicle to do the same thing. It reminds us that this episode is going to be different, and it's going to throw us off at every turn. In the script for Jose Chung, Lord Kinboat is described as a brute from planet Harryhausen. Ray Harryhausen was an Academy Award-winning special effects artist who utilized stop-motion animation. His credits included The Seventh Voyage of Sinbad, Jason and the Argonauts, and Clash of the Titans. The X-Files used a man in costume. It used visual effects to try to simulate the Harryhausen stop-motion animation effect. Whitley Strieber was a horror writer who had previously written two successful novels, Wolfen, about werewolf-like creatures, and The Hunger, about vampires. In 1987, Strieber hit on a new idea.
I realized that I had an opportunity here to create an entirely new literary genre, a non-fiction science fiction.
He published an autobiographical non-fiction book entitled Communion. In it, Strieber reported that he had been the victim of alien abductions. Despite the skepticism towards an established horror author writing a non-fiction science fiction, the book reached the #1 position on the New York Times bestseller list.
Now, see, that gimmick alone will guarantee its landing on the bestseller list. In short, to answer your question, money.
In August 95, the Fox network broadcast Alien Autopsy, Fact or Fiction, purported to be footage of the Roswell autopsy.
Alien Autopsy, Fact or Fiction?
Is this actual footage of the alien autopsy, or simply a well-made hoax?
In the 1977 film Close Encounters of the Third Kind, a man experiences a close encounter. After that encounter, he becomes obsessed with a particular shape which he sculpts, first in mashed potatoes.
When I was doing research for my book, The Caligarian Candidate.
The Caligarian Candidate. This is an amalgam of two different works. The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari is a 1920s German silent film that has been described as the first true horror film. A psychiatrist controls an entranced sleepwalker to commit murders. In 1962, The Manchurian Candidate, Chinese communists hypnotize and brainwash an American soldier into being an unwitting assassin. Harold appears at Chrissy's window wearing a torn shirt, echoing Marlon Brando's torn shirt in A Streetcar Named Desire. The Men in Black in Jose Chung 1 is played by Jesse the Body Ventura, who was notorious for a backbreaker move, which he later employs against Blaine. The game show host Alex Trebek is featured and explicitly named.
You're feeling very sleepy, very relaxed.
Alex Trebek? The game show host?
Reportedly, Morgan had sought musician Johnny Cash to play the Man in Black. Cash is in fact known as the Man in Black.
I'm the Man in Black.
But apparently Johnny Cash wasn't available, which is a pity. Rocky Erickson, the founder of the psychedelic band 13th Floor Elevators. In 1968, Rocky was performing at a concert when he suddenly and inexplicably began speaking complete gibberish, temporarily losing his ability to speak intelligibly. Rocky was committed to multiple psychiatric hospitals and received electroconvulsive therapy. After his release, Rocky formed a new band, which would come to be known as Rocky Erickson and the Aliens. In 1982, he released a sworn statement explaining, "I, Roger Rocky Erickson, do hereby declare that I am not a member of the human race, not an Earthling, and in fact am descended and an alien from a planet other than Earth. I hope that this will prove to the person who is putting electric shocks into my head that I am an alien. I am declaring this so that I am not in violation of any world or any international laws of the Earth, as I am showing by thus admission that I am in fact an alien." And Rocky ultimately relocates to El Cajon, California. That's Darin Morgan's hometown.
Come, I shall show up.
Of the third alien, whose name, he soon told me, was Lord Kinboat.
Vladimir Nabokov's 1962 novel Pale Fire presents itself as an extended poem written by John Shade, and its accompanying annotations and commentary written by scholar Dr. Charles Kinboat. Dr. Kinboat's commentary soon takes over the work, and the reader begins to realize that Kinboat may be a madman. Pale Fire is a very early example of a metafiction, a text about a text. And like Jose Chung, it's extremely intertextual, featuring allusions and references to numerous other works of literature. Nabokov provided the inspiration for the episode with one of the comments he makes about the subjectivity of reality.
Well, just as long as you're attempting to record the truth.
God, no, how can I possibly do that?
What do you mean?
I spent 3 months in Class County, and everybody there has a different version of what truly happened. Truth is as subjective as reality.
Said Nabokov, reality is a very subjective affair. I can only define it as a kind of gradual accumulation of information and as specialization. If we take a lily, for instance, or any other kind of natural object, a lily is more real to a naturalist than it is to an ordinary person, but it's more real still to a botanist, and yet another stage of reality is reached to a botanist who specializes in lilies. You can get nearer and nearer, so to speak, to reality, but you can never get near enough, because reality is an infinite succession of steps, levels of perceptions, false bottoms, and hints, unquenchable, unattainable. You can know more and more and more about one thing, but you can never know everything about one thing. It's hopeless. In both Scooby-Doo and Jose Chung, a human disguised as a scary monster is revealed by pulling off a rubber mask. I don't know if this is an actual intertextual reference or just one we perceive, but I don't think it matters. And my personal favorite intertextual reference is unintentional.
Agent Cooper here might want to try a slice of that pie.
In 1990, Twin Peaks premiered. The X-Files was later considered a spiritual successor to Twin Peaks. And while Twin Peaks was essentially surrealistic, the X-Files was primarily postmodern. David Duchovny appeared in both.
Coop.
Twin Peaks and Jose Chung both feature an FBI agent who travels to a small town to investigate a crime with supernatural overtones.
Federal Bureau of Investigation.
The agent visits a local diner and becomes obsessed with their pie.
They got a cherry pie there that'll kill you.
Ordering piece after piece.
2 more pieces of this incredible pie.
Okay.
Man, oh man, you must have the metabolism of a bumblebee.
Amazingly, while viewers all over the world independently spotted this homage, there was one person who reportedly didn't spot it. Darin Morgan, the writer of the episode. Okay, so modernist television mostly wanted to be universally accessible, thus comprehension was based almost exclusively on its surface text. Any subtext that would alienate the audience, however minimally, was taboo. Many viewers had poor picture reception. Others watched television without looking at the screen, such as while doing chores. Shows had to be comprehensible based on their audio alone. This was as true as late as 1982. Police Squad was an ABC series by the creators of Airplane. Police Squad was canceled after just 6 episodes. The president of ABC Entertainment explained that Police Squad was canceled because the viewer had to watch it in order to appreciate it. Postmodern television featured increased complexity. Postmodern TV allowed subtext to play an essential role in the work. Consider the Seinfeld episode, The Contest. The principal characters make a wager.
So you're still master of your domain?
Yes. Yes, I am. Master of my domain.
In doing so, the show relied upon an essential subtext to carry the story forward. The word masturbation is never uttered. Metamodern TV continues the trends of increasing complexity and increasing usage of subtext. But what's more, Metamodern television employs what could be called sub-subtext, information that is neither explicit nor obviously implied, information that may not even be consciously registered by a casual first viewing. Deep text supersaturates the text with meaningful content. Intertextuality, callbacks, flashbacks, flash forwards, flash sideways, in-jokes, and hidden references. This gives a text the effect of fractal dimensionality, which is to say, the closer you look at it, the more you examine it, the more complex it becomes. Like intertextuality, VCR technology really unlocked the ability to make TV episodes into deep texts, allowing the viewer to watch and rewatch as needed to process the work. But perhaps just as essential was online communication, which meant viewers could collaboratively interpret the work. The immersive effect of deep text inspires the viewer to recognize patterns that no one else intended. Deep text might seem trivial, but it's not. It invites the viewer to become participants in the creation of their own experience of the work. There are at least 21 proper nouns in Jose Chung's From Outer Space. Virtually all of them have some deeper identifiable meaning.
Oh.
The Lonely Buddha is one of my favorite novels.
Oh.
The Lonely Buddha is an apt title for this episode's theme, the alienating nature of personal enlightenment. In Chung's work, the names have been changed. Dana becomes Diana, Scully becomes Lesky, Fox becomes Reynard, and Mulder becomes Meldrake.
Reynard Moldrake, a ticking time bomb of insanity.
Previous episodes of The X-Files had jokes about Mulder owning porn videos. In this scene, we see a shirtless Mulder alone in bed watching television, while the Chung narration wonders how Moldrake receives any pleasure from life, only to discover that Mulder is watching the famous Patterson-Gimlin Bigfoot film. The episode takes place in Class County, so named for UFO debunker Philip J. Klass, a founder of the skeptic group Psychop. Air Force Sergeant Hynek is named after ufologist J. Allen Hynek, the inventor of the close encounter system for classifying UFO experiences. The UFO pilots, Robert Valley and Jack Schaefer, take their names from UFO researchers Robert Schaefer and Jack Valley. Valley is the source of the line used by the Man in Black. No other object has been misidentified as a flying saucer more often than the planet Venus. The other flying saucer pilot, Jack Schaefer, the cigarette-smoking alien, takes his surname from Robert Schaefer, a prominent UFO skeptic and another founding member of Psychop. The hypnotist is credited as Dr. Fingers. This alludes to the CIA's MK-Ultra mind control experiments, which, quote, administered LSD and other psychoactive drugs to unwitting subjects. Apparently that part's true, as crazy as it sounds. Now here's where things get even weirder. According to some sources, like John Marks and Gordon Thomas, MK-Ultra included an effort named Operation Spellbinder. Spellbinder was essentially an attempt to weaponize hypnosis. Reportedly, the CIA attempted to create a sort of, quote, sleeper killer, a real-life Manchurian candidate. To complete the mission, they recruited an experienced hypnotist who was reportedly selected because of his willingness to carry out potentially fatal experiments. This hypnotist was nicknamed Dr. Fingers because of the theatrical way he used his hands to put the subjects into a trance. And of course, Dr. Fingers has a secretive counterpart who is credited rather aptly as Dr. Hand.
You really bleeped up this case.
The foul-mouthed Detective Manners is named for the foul-mouthed X-Files director Kim Manners. Originally, Kim Manners was going to play the role, but that didn't happen. The stupendous Yappy returns after his prior appearance in Clyde Bruckman's Final Repose, also written by Darin Morgan. Yappy is again played by Yap Brooker, David Duchovny's stand-in, hence the name Yappy. Mulder indicts the military-industrial entertainment complex, noting that writer Jose Chung is under the influence of, quote, Warden White Incorporated, a subsidiary of McDougal Kessler. Writer Darin Morgan was himself represented by talent agency Warden White and Associates. McDougal Kessler, another cog in the military-industrial entertainment complex, draws its name from X-Files editors Heather McDougal and Sue Kessler. Rocky relocates to El Cajon, California, Darin Morgan's hometown. Even the name Jose Chung defies simple classification. Is it Spanish or Chinese or something else? And at that time, cross-cultural marriages were far less common, making the name Jose Chung sound almost intentionally unreal. Reportedly, the name started as a prank by the X-Files writing staff. Writer John Sheban would repeatedly phone the office pretending to be Jose Chung, an aspiring writer who just wouldn't take no for an answer. Hence, the office workers were shocked to see Jose Chung's name in the title of an episode. Harold Lamb is the name of Harold Lloyd's character in the 1925 silent film The Freshman. In that film, innocent freshman Harold attempts to woo not a Chrissy, but a Peggy. Blaine is an enigma. He wears a t-shirt for Space Above and Beyond, which was created by Darin Morgan's brother Glenn and his partner James Wong. But Blaine's name is a mystery. While there's, of course, a very famous Faulkner, it's not clear what the connection would be, or if there even is a connection. Chrissy Giorgio is probably the biggest mystery of all. Chung explains that
Chrissy Giorgio has come to believe her alien visitation was a message to improve the condition of her own world.
So who is she named after? Giorgio is a very specific name. Now, maybe it refers to Giorgio Filipputi, who had a UFO experience in 1978 with what he called a Little Oriental Airman. I don't think so. Might be Giorgio Di Botanto, who had a UFO experience in Genoa and later authored a book entitled UFO Contact from Angels and Starships. That could be. Might be, though, that it's Giorgio Bongiovanni, who in 1989 began having visions of the Virgin Mary and beings of light from other worlds. He received messages, developed stigmata, and was contacted by UFOs. In October 1994, he spoke to the United Nations in an event named Dialogue on the Universe, the Result of Extraterrestrial Contact on Human Evolution. Ultimately, I don't know who Giorgio is. I know that probably doesn't have the closure you're looking for, but there are a lot of Giorgios. But there is one Giorgio I'm pretty sure the episode is not referencing, and that's Giorgio Tsoukalos, the Ancient Aliens guy. He was just a high schooler at the time Jose Chung aired. So now we come to the part where I hope everybody did the reading. Okay, that's good. That's good. So Everything Bad is Good for You by Stephen Johnson. How Popular Culture is Actually Making Us Smarter. It's a good book, quick, easy read. Hopefully nobody had any hard times with it. And so to return to earlier eras of television, you generally see that the theme is increasing complexity over time. Earlier eras had linear stories, one story per episode. That's it. If that wasn't simple enough, early TV used to use what Johnson calls flashing arrows. So cinematic techniques used to bring some object or situation to the attention of the viewers. They make it really, really, really easy for you to follow along and make it really hard for you to miss it. Because again, you might not be paying attention. You might be doing something else, or you might be new to television. They had to work very hard to develop the complex language that we today take for granted. We grew up with a visual film and TV vocabulary. One of the other things you see about the early modernist television is suspension of disbelief. So let's actually diagram some narratives and see what we get, just like Johnson does in the book. Every episode of Dragnet is very, very simple. It's Joe Friday's story. The first voice we hear is his, and we stick with his point of view throughout the episode. We follow him as he learns of the crimes, interviews the witnesses, and catches the crook. Every episode follows the same linear format, always following Joe Friday. No cold opens, there are no flashbacks, there are no flash forwards, and the audience can't even fathom the idea of a flash sideways yet. Okay, but early television isn't always that simple. Dragnet is very simple even for early television. Eventually, writers discover the B-plot, a second story which is cross-cut with the main A-plot. In early television, the two threads are mostly disconnected from each other, involving different stories and different characters, all functioning independently. There were two different episodes that got spliced together, but they're not really connected. They exist in their own spaces each. You could have taken each one of them and said, well, let's make an episode out of this. And instead of just having one, you had two. But again, no flashbacks, no nonlinearities, no realities within realities. Simple stories about simple humans. Postmodernist television is different. We start to have an increasing complexity. Flashbacks are now allowable. There can be multiple protagonists, each traversing their own narrative thread. And we see a lot of deconstruction of earlier paradigms, so a suspicion towards stories, a constant reminder that what I'm hearing isn't necessarily real. Early modernist television, you just want to sit down and turn off every your distractions and enjoy yourself. Postmodernist television, you want to engage more actively in it. So let's look at the postmodern sitcom Seinfeld. In almost every episode, several story threads are presented at the beginning, generally involving characters in separate and unrelated situations, which then converge and are interwoven towards the end of the episode in an ironic fashion. So, metamodernism continues the trend of increasing complexity. In fact, not only are we allowed to have flashbacks, you can have flash forwards, flash sideways, stories within stories, plays within plays, TV shows within TV shows. Things take place in characters' imaginations. Where modernist was about suspending disbelief, and postmodernism was about deconstructing belief and suspension of disbelief, metamodernism is a little more playful. It involves a suspension of disbelief. That is to say, your TV show will increasingly remind you that it's not real.
This is not happening. This is not happening. This is not happening.
In the middle of suspending disbelief, it will come and point out to you, I'm not real, I'm pretend.
This is not happening. This is not happening.
So let me show what I mean by some of this. Take Lost. In every episode of Lost, a main character is involved in two different places in time. The narrative jumps back and forth between a present narrative and a relevant flashback, or a flash forward, or a flash sideways, or whatever. And the two different narratives echo each other in interesting ways. So this is different than an A plot and a B plot. But this is Jose Chung. To comprehend the work, the audience has to parse the episode into some kind of comprehensible narrative structure. And in this simplified diagram, we have 13 different points of view. And that's me trying to be simple. A more complex diagram could be made. How can you help an audience make sense out of this, especially a 1990s audience? How do you keep this episode from becoming a tangled and indecipherable mess? Well, they figured out how. One trick they used were kicks.
What's a kick?
It's that feeling of falling you get that jolts you awake. It snaps you out of the dream.
Kicks that could instantly jar the viewer out of the narrative flow and into a higher narrative. And so a kick is sort of a suspension of disbelief. It's intentionally unreal. Writer Darin Morgan previously used a kick of sorts in the episode War of the Copperphages. 1 minute you're watching an X-Files episode about killer cockroaches, but suddenly you see a shadow. A large bug is crawling across your television screen. 1 moment you're happily entranced by the X-Files, comfortable in your suspension of disbelief, and the kick intentionally knocks you out of the narrative thread. Sort of like a radioactive decay, maybe. The roach on the screen kicks you out of the X-Files and back into real life. And in Jose Chung, kicks transport the viewers between narrative threads. Jose Chung does this a lot. Jose Chung kicks us out of the flow by the intentional baldardization of profanity.
You really bleeped up this case.
Well, of course, he didn't actually say bleep.
1 minute we're in a Scully flashback, and then the word bleep is used, and it kicks us out of Scully's flashback and back into the earlier stage of Scully's interview with Jose Chung. In other cases, Jose Chung uses a cutless jump cut. So a scene change without a cut. So 1 minute Harold is being interviewed by police. He looks down. Then he looks up. There's no cut. But now he's being interviewed by Mulder and Scully. So we have one of these too when Rocky talks to the men in black. 1 minute he's talking to the men in black. He looks down, and then he looks back up again, and he's talking to Mulder and Scully. The flashback to the men in black uses a whip pan. A whip pan approximates experience of the human eye as it moves from one subject to another. A whip pan is usually used to imply that intercutting scenes are used at the same moment. Seeing Lord Kinboat deliver his ridiculous lines kicks us out of Rocky's flashback. Mulder's skepticism kicks us out of Scully's flashback and into Chung's interview with Scully. Blaine's absurd observations also serve to kick us out of the narrative thread. Gillian Anderson's hair was dyed for the role of Scully, with shades varying between seasons. Hyper-scrutiny of Anderson's appearance reportedly led to questions of whether her hair was a little too red. In the same scene, Blaine recalls Mulder screaming. In War of the Copperphage is also by Darin Morgan. Scully jokingly inquires if Mulder has a girly scream.
And not a girly scream, but the scream of someone being confronted by some before unknown monster that had no right existing on the same planet I inhabited.
Are you sure it wasn't a girly scream?
In Blaine's retelling, this girly scream actually makes an appearance. Even the music serves to kick you out of flow. The X-Files theme itself is included in the episode, and a variation of similar tone is used in the background of Dead Alien Truth or Humbug. The concluding moments of the episode included the actual X-Files theme with one note tweaked. In addition to kicks, we also have glitches in the Matrix, moments where earlier text is reused in novel contexts.
Oh, déjà vu.
A déjà vu is usually a glitch in the Matrix. It happens when they change something.
Darin Morgan used glitches in his earlier works. In the episode Humbug, Scully looks at a picture of the alligator man and says,
"Imagine going through your whole life looking like this."
In the closing scene, a freak looks at Mulder and makes the exact same observation.
"Imagine going through your whole life looking like that."
It's the same line, but in completely opposite contexts. Morgan also used a glitch in War of the Copperphages. Early in the episode, Scully warns,
Yeah, well, don't look too hard. You might not like what you find.
Isn't that what Dr. Zaius said to Charlton Heston at the end of Planet of the Apes?
In the closing scene, Mulder asks the scientists,
"What do you hope to find from it?"
Bambi replies,
His destiny.
and Ivanov observes,
That what Dr. Zaius said to Zira at the end of the Planet of the Apes?
The same lines are reused in a different context, and they resonate and echo with each other. The reused lines bend your understanding across time, and Jose Chung's glitches echo across narrative threads. Jose Chung has a lot of this sort of thing. There are 3 interrogation scenes with similar lines and similar staging.
Well, you don't sound so sure of it.
You don't sound so sure of that.
There are 3 hypnosis scenes with similar lines and similar staging. There are 3 instances where a shadow of an alien head enters the frame. Chung, Rocky, and Blaine each say the line, "I know how crazy this is going to sound."
No, I know how crazy this is going to sound, but...
I know how crazy this is going to sound, but...
I know how crazy all this sounds, but I don't care.
A dead man comes up 5 different times.
Father finds out I'm a dead man.
You're a dead man.
You tell anyone, you're a dead man.
If I find out you lied to me, you're a dead man.
Looks like I'm a dead man.
And 3 instances of how the hell should I know.
How the hell should I know? How the hell should I know?
How the hell should I know?
In total, there's some 27 instances of kicks or glitches in Jose Chung, for an average instance of once every 2 minutes. So look how far we've come. TV was once decried as a wasteland for a procession of formulaic comedies about totally unbelievable families. The first TV shows were a pablum of homogeneity. But by the mid-90s, TV had evolved. Jose Chung is a complex network of intertextual references, deep textual allusions, intersecting threads. Its complexity is a harbinger of the future of television.
Harold, what are those things?
How the hell should I know?
Jack, what is that thing?
How the hell should I know?
Seem non-nonplussed by these contradictions. Nonplussed by non-nonplussed by...
These simulator.
Hard to believe I'm not really in space.
My single is dropping.
I know who I am. I'm a dude playing a dude disguised as another dude.
Am I the only one that remembers our horrible camping trip? That's what we said when we were painting Shirley's nursery. Guys, let's not repeat the events of Caesar Salad Day. Abed, stop being meta.
The story of the story is the story. Movies about making movies about making movies.
This is the movie.
We're on a show within a show. My real name is Tracy Morgan.
You're in a toy commercial.
This part is hard to put in because it's so personal, but I have to share it because it's the truth. In 1996, my family had moved from a big city on the liberal West Coast to a rural county in Montana. I was all alone in a new place where I had no friends.
I hate this town. I hate people.
My friends were the people on the internet who were also X-Files. It meant something to be a high schooler who spent your Friday night at home, quote, alone, chatting with, quote, internet friends, as you all watched The X-Files. In some ways, it made me feel very alone. But after Jose Chung's From Outer Space, something changed. Because, as Chung observes,
For although we may not be alone in the universe, in our own separate ways, on this planet, we are all alone.
That concluding narrative of Jose Chung deeply affected me. Yes, I was alone. But I wasn't alone in being alone. We were all alone. We were all alone together. 15 years later, Dan Harmon said it best.
You're afraid you don't fit in. You're afraid you'll be alone. Great news! You share that with all of us, so you'll never be alone, and you'll always fit in.
Epilogue.
You should go, Mulder.
This is all wrong, Scully. This is not how the story's supposed to end.
After my lecture, people came up to talk to me, and they all wanted to know the same thing.
Where's the writer?
Whatever happened to the writer of the episode? Whatever happened to Darin Morgan? I always explained that Darin Morgan was sort of the Bobby Fischer of the X-Files. He won. He won the world championship of the X-Files with his original takes on the X-Files and Millennium. And then, the ever-original Darin Morgan made the most original, unexpected move of all. He disappeared. For 20 years I had wondered about this man and his motivations, and then two amazing things happened.
I want to speak to the writer.
The first big thing was that the wonderful actor Kumail Nanjiani scored a series of in-depth interviews with Darin Morgan for Kumail's podcast, The X-Files Files. Those interviews are goldmine. Go listen to them. They answered a lot of the questions I had. The biggest question I had was this. Why did Darin Morgan supersaturate the script with meaning? Why was there, quote, deep text? Why does nearly every proper noun in the script have some deeper meaning, even when there's no way your typical audience member would have ever put it all together? In his interview with Kumail, Darin Morgan explains why. Says Morgan,
all the hypnosis scenes are just a ripoff of the Manchurian Candidate.
Okay.
So that's why I have to when you rip something off, you have to acknowledge it. So I know I'm ripping it off.
Yeah. Just take it, but just throw in the word Manchurian somewhere.
And then it was announced that the X-Files would be returning to television with a new miniseries in 2016. And if that wasn't enough, one of the episodes is slated to be scripted by the original Fluke Man, the man behind Humbug, Clyde Bruckman, Jose Chung, and Doomsday Defense. Writer Darin Morgan.